Hi, you all, and a very good morning. Welcome to another insightful session in which we aim to inform you, to inspire you, and maybe also to challenge you a bit on all kind of different burning topics and riveting conversations that are on everybody's desk. My name is Jeroen Baardemans, and I'm very happy to be your moderator today. And I'm also happy that you join us today as well, because it's your virtual presence that enriches our Aurora Live Business Network. So we really want to express our gratitude to you for that, because we do have another very interesting topic today in the field of AI, of course, I would say. AI is, well, on everybody's desk, and if it's not, I think you have a problem. That's what we have explored in the last session so far. AI has a lot of potential as well, all those different kind of opportunities to have a competitive advantage, to enrich your business. Lots of opportunities are there, but also challenges, because there's one, there's one key thing that is that has both the challenging side but also the opportunity side, and that's of course the hunger for data. AI has a hunger for data, and when we talk about data, we can talk about a lot of opportunities, but we can also talk about a lot of challenge, and one big challenge in particular, of course, GDPR, and how to deal with data in a compliant and appropriate way. That's one of the biggest challenges that is when you are, well, let's say, unleashing AI's potential. And that's exactly the, let's say, the conflict of interest, what we're going to talk today about. I'm going to talk today about a real expert in the field. He is the former, the former Chief Analytics and AI Officer at True Corporation, a prominent telecommunications company in Thailand. He has a lot of experience in the area of AI, and he is also the author of a book, The Machines of Tomorrow, in which he describes, let's say, the history of AI, but also the way in what society should expect from AI in the coming decades. So I do think that we have a very, well, let's say, expert to, well, have a debate on the discussions I've stated so far, but also would like to have a debate with you as well. So please join me in this conversation. Probably you may know already, you can use the chat in the right-hand side of your screen. You can just put in your questions on your thoughts and your ideas, and I will try to address them as many as possible here live in the show. During the session, also at the end of the session, an evaluation question comes up, so please, we will be very happy to hear your feedback, so do not forget to just give us a few seconds of your time to provide us with your feedback as well. For now, I would like to introduce to you the expert of today. Please welcome Pedro Uria-Recio. Hi, Pedro. Good morning. Happy to have you here in our show. How are you?
Very good. Good morning for you. Good afternoon already for me. I'm very, very happy to be with you and with the people that are watching us.
I'll try to do my best in my, well, let's say not that very good Spanish, but I hope I pronounce your name correctly. But let's stick to Pedro if you're okay with that for now, right?
Yeah, we can stick to Pedro, no problem at all.
Okay.
Yes.
Pedro, today we're going to talk about, let's say, the potential of AI, but also the challenges, and one of the biggest challenges, of course, is how to deal in a proper way with data, also with all the regulation, the GDPR, and also the EU AI Act that has, well, come in quite recently. What are your first thoughts, just to kick off, when talking about the question, okay, how to unleash AI potential without losing grip on all the requirements you have to fulfill when it comes to data and GDPR?
So I am going to take a wide view in this conversation. So I am an AI practitioner. I'm not going to talk exactly about what companies should be doing right now, what you have to do in your company tomorrow. But I'm going to talk more in general about what AI regulation means, not only in the European Union, but I am European, but I am outside the European Union, and I have been working all my life in emerging markets. And also, I'm going to take a broader scope about what the implications of this for society, for innovation, for business, for education are, not today or next year or in the next 5 years, but in the longer term. So that is how I would like to approach it. That this is the way I have approached it in the book, where I talk about AI, but I talk about it with a very long-term framework, a very long-term mindset of what it means, how AI has been developed historically in connection with economic cycles, in connection with political cycles, and what this all means, right?
Yeah. And I think it's good, and I think it's interesting to have a long-term perspective. On the other hand, and you may recognize it fully as an AI expert, the hype is still going on, right? People have to, they're really impatient. They really want to step on this train, well, preferably yesterday instead of tomorrow. How difficult is it then to keep this long-term focus?
Well, I mean, companies are starting implementing AI at this moment. Everybody's talking about AI. Unfortunately, very few companies are starting implementing it. Very, very few companies, right? While everybody talks about it. I think one of the challenges, and we are going to talk about it, is the fact that AI models, large language models, are not completely mature. And there could be instances in which they lead to unwanted consequences. I give you an example that happened last year in Canada. So Air Canada implemented an AI model for customer service. The AI model gave wrong information to a customer, telling him that he had the right to ask for compensation for some flight that he couldn't take or something like that. It was around 600 euros of compensation. The reality is that he didn't have the right to have that compensation. And when he found out, he was unhappy, went to a judge, and the judge said, Air Canada, I'm sorry that your chatbot gave the wrong information, that you have to pay for this compensation. These kind of things happen. And well, how do we get prepared for this?
Let's focus a bit more on, well, the key question in this session, of course, is it's on the one hand unleashing AI's potential. On the other hand, you have to deal with, for example, well, let's say the other challenges coming up who also have a hunger for data as AI has. For example, GDPR. If you, from your experience and from your perspective, would say, well, if we are talking about, let's say, the intersection of the potential of AI on the one hand and GDPR on the other hand, what are, in your opinion, let's say the 1-2 biggest challenges and, of course, the 1-2 biggest opportunity on a broader level, you would say?
Okay. As you said, well, AI models have a hunger for data. They have to be trained with data. The more data you have, the more accurate your model is going to be. Even if you use an open source model or a third-party model, you might want to adapt a language model I'm talking about. You may want to adapt the language to your industry. You might want to teach that model about your products, your customers, etc. You need data. The problem is that most companies don't have enough data. The implication of the intersection between data protection laws and AI is something in the next few years we're going to see it, and a lot of companies will have to deal with that, is what we call synthetic data. That is going to have huge implications. So what is synthetic data? Well, AI needs data to be trained, but that data, because of privacy regulations, is not always accessible. And in many cases, rightly so, because the data of customers has to be protected. So what companies are doing, already startups are working on this, is creating data that is not real, but it looks realistic. It's data that has been created by another AI model. It really looks like real data, but it doesn't belong to real people. One example of that is self-driving car algorithms. Some companies, like Google, for example, have been filming the roads for over a decade, almost 2 decades, in fact. And they have a lot of videos that can be used to train algorithms to drive. But other more traditional car manufacturers don't have those videos. So what they do is they create synthetic videos about road and people passing, cars being overtaken, animals crossing, and this is used for to train these algorithms. Obviously, this also has consequences, and one of the consequences is if we are using data that is unreal to train an algorithm, how can we make the difference in the output of that algorithm between reality, between truth, and fake information, between reality and what is not real, right? But yeah, I do believe that the implication is that European companies around the world are going to use synthetic data more and more, which has opportunities and it has challenges as well.
And is it because, like you said, that there is most companies are not able to have the data themselves, so that's why they going to use synthetic data? Or is it because, for example, for other reasons, perhaps that you have other, let's say, requirements using, let's say, real data instead of synthetic data when it comes to GDPR and privacy, for example, data protection?
One of the reasons is privacy, right? So companies may not want to take the risk. AI algorithms have a deep hunger for data. You need a lot of data to train them, even if there are advancements that are reducing that need of data. One reason is data protection. The other reason is that companies might not have enough data, or in order to train these algorithms, you might need data components that you don't have, questions that you have not asked your customers, information that you might not know about your customers, right? Or maybe you need video and what you have is some text information. These are some of the reasons why synthetic data is going to become more and more important. The other implication about data protection for this kind of AI models is that sometimes you don't have the data, but the business partner has the data. So you have some information about your customers, but you require other information that another company has. Now, you could technically implement some data sharing across the two companies. Of course, there are data regulations that will make it necessary to have customer consent, not only in the European Union, in all the countries, because GDPR has been the example that all other countries in the world have followed in order to implement data regulations, right? In the Middle East, in Asia, etc., with the possible exception of the United States. So coming back, data sharing is something that could be done with the right consent, but it's very difficult. I have worked on data sharing with, according to the Personal Data Protection Act of Thailand and other countries in Southeast Asia. It is difficult to implement. And that is one of the reasons why synthetic data could solve that problem. Now, coming again, synthetic data is something that very few companies are already using. Self-driving algorithms is one example. Robotics is another example. I think it's going to become more used because of these reasons. One of the countries that is possibly leading the agenda in the area of data sharing is China. There are geopolitical reasons for that. People think that China doesn't have data protection laws. It does. Well, it's a topic. Data sharing is a topic that is very complex. It has very deep ethical implications. You have to be very careful about it. But it's a possibility that it exists, and companies, perhaps inside and outside the European Union, might explore in accordance to their data regulations, which are different in every place.
Yeah. So it sounds, actually, listening to you, that, well, starting using synthetic data, let's say, will free you from all requirements that comes with GDPR and privacy issues, or am I too optimistic now?
I don't know if it will free you from all requirements, but it will free you from some of those requirements. However, synthetic data comes with huge ethical implications, and the main implication is that it makes it so much more complex to differentiate what is real from what is not real. people now are very concerned about deepfakes, right? People used to think that video was something you could trust. If it came on television, people trusted it because it was difficult to fake a video. Now it's not really impossible. It's quite easy to fake a video, right? And synthetic data is going to take that exponential. It's going to have huge implications in terms of communication, in terms of public policy. Some of them are probably going to be dystopian. I'm just describing what some companies are doing, particularly self-driving cars, advertising, etc. This is something that is happening. And this is something that, according to my understanding, and I'm not a legal expert, is not really fully covered in any regulation in the European Union or outside. We have not seen the real we have not seen the real consequences of that. We have not really seen it. So again, I think it is normal that it's not regulated. We have not really seen it.
Yeah. Because that's interesting. We have not really seen, and of course we have to wait and see what happens and what the developments are in order to, let's say, fine tune again on all those different things we are active on. But still, currently, let's say today, everybody wants to use AI with all the potential with real data or synthetic data. But what in your opinion is the key thing to do? How to, on the one hand, make progress on using AI's potential, but on the other hand, well, sticking to the right requirements when it comes to GDPR and data privacy issues. Of course, a company really wants to. Both are as important to each other, but cannot seen without each other. How to deal with this? What's in your opinion the key thing to do?
What I always recommend as a practitioner, as a consultant as well, is to start implementing internal use cases rather than external use cases, right? AI is complex to implement. Mm-hmm. It has a large potential for giving wrong answers through hallucinations. It has a large potential for perhaps disclosing data that you didn't want to disclose by mistake because the language model, for some reason, provides it. Right? Large language models are largely black boxes, right? It's very difficult to understand what is happening inside. Like a human brain, it's very difficult to understand, really. There are so many interconnections, it's difficult to really make sense of it, right? So implementing internal use cases, it helps you from, at least if there is a mistake, you're keeping it in-house, use cases that maybe is about IT problem resolution, right? The service desk for IT for internal cases. HR communications for somebody who wants to take holidays or is asking what does the policy say about these cases that might have smaller implications. Then you have external, after that you can go to external cases. External cases, there are some of them that are more sensible, others are less sensible. Marketing in general is less sensible. Giving the wrong advertisement to somebody might have consequences, and in some countries they regulate against it. One of them that I know is Japan. But in general, the consequence of giving a wrong advertisement to somebody is much less than making a mistake in a self-driving car algorithms or in an algorithm that is operating a robot that is doing surgery, right? So those less sensitive use cases to mistakes possibly could be the next step. And then you go into things that are more sensitive, possibly because there is a large cost in failing, maybe a human damage, or because it's sensitive from a reputational point of view.
We have some questions coming in, and thank you for that, for sending us your questions, because I think that the topic of synthetic data is interesting to audience, Pedro. Maybe someone tuned in later, but can you please explain again in one sentence what synthetic data actually is? And then a question from Erik comes in, from Stefan, I should say, is can an AI which is trained with synthetic data support a real business case? Could you answer on these questions?
Yeah.
So first in one, and just a
So
repetition of what synthetic data is. Yeah.
Synthetic data is data that is not real, but is realistic. It looks like real. For example, if you have a customer database where you have customer names, customer emails, the age of those customers, a number of demographics, what products they have bought, but maybe you don't have enough data to train an algorithm. You don't have enough customers. Well, what you could do is create more data for that same table while keeping the statistical characteristics of the data you already have. So the percentages of different kinds of people, different kinds of product is statistically going to be similar in terms of overages, in terms of standard deviations, etc., etc. It's indistinguishable from real data, but it's not real. If it is video about, imagine that you are doing face recognition. Well, imagine you don't have enough faces of people to do face recognition. So you are, with generative AI, creating photos of people who don't exist. You will create many of those photos, and those photos is what you are applying as data to train your algorithm.
Yeah. By the way, Pedro, you are the real Pedro right now. I'm talking to the real Pedro right now, right?
Yeah, I'm the real Pedro, yes.
Okay. Just a check in between.
Yes. Same thing for voice, same thing for, right? So that is synthetic data. Will synthetic data be used in real business cases? Yes. I mean, there are startups in the US that create synthetic data for businesses that don't have enough data. And as I say, self-driving cars is an example. Same thing is going to happen in many other areas, right? It's a polemic topic. Now, from a wider perspective about why synthetic data is important in terms of AI research, this is an area of relevance, and it sounds very futuristic, but hear me out. These large language model companies and OpenAI is very open about talking about this, even if OpenAI is not an OpenAI data is proprietary, right? It's not an open model, yeah. But they are very open about talking very clearly that their objective is to create a more and more intelligent kind of AI and going into general artificial intelligence, which will be a kind of artificial intelligence that is similarly intelligent as us. They talk about it. They have launched a program that is called super alignment so that they can align the ethical values of that intelligence with human values, etc. So it's very clear that the industry wants to go here, whether it is good or bad. Well, synthetic data is something that is an avenue to enable that artificial general intelligence because it's a way to create genuinely novel algorithms. If you train an AI with real data, you are limited because reality has a limit. Reality is what exists. If you are training with data that does not exist, you are going beyond that limit, enabling algorithms that think in completely different ways. I know this sounds very futuristic, but that's another reason why synthetic data is going to become part of our lives, and we're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. I want to talk with you about the notion of bias. You already touched upon that already, but there are some questions coming in. For example, from Erik and somebody else asked the question on, well, have you researched whether or not the synthetic data will correctly represent the real life situation and specifically the diversity of outliers, minorities in the real population? So one could say if you say you will extend the limit of the real situation, yeah, how do you deal with not being biased in terms of diversity, for example? And Erik, for example, has the broader general question, actually, what's the risk of bias in general when using synthetic data? What are your thoughts on that?
bias is a very prominent topic in Western societies. However, it's an extremely subjective topic. Bias is in the mind of the people. The same behavior for somebody could be biased, for another person could be unbiased. For that reason, it has huge political connotations that are country specific and culture specific, right? So to answer your question, can AI help in solving bias? It depends on how it is used, and it depends on how you define bias, right? Now, a lot of people, from a public policy point of view, from different perspectives, try to solve the problem of bias by introducing of opposite sign, right? Is that a real solution? Well, I mean, algorithmically, possibly not. Philosophically, it depends. Politically, it also depends on what you believe, right? Well, I mean, if you want an AI to introduce a bias of opposite direction to whatever you are sensitive to, you can certainly do it, by all means, right? The other possibility of eliminating bias is eliminating from the data set those parameters that you think should not be part of a decision. For example, imagine that you are a financial institution and you are giving loans, and you say, I want these particular parameters, which could be some kinds of demographics or age or whatever you want. Whatever, again, is very subjective. Whatever your subjectivity tells you, that should not be included. And then you eliminate it from the algorithm. And then you say, well, now I'm going to run the algorithm again without these parameters in the hope that the algorithm is going to act in an unbiased way. And the reality is that that is not going to happen, because possibly those parameters that you have eliminated are correlated with thousands of other things that you don't even know who they are or what they are, and you don't even know how to take them out. Yeah. So it's very complex, but coming back to the thing, technology, and AI is a technology, is a tool that can be used by humans to achieve what they want. Sometimes they will want things that are correct, sometimes they will want things that are incorrect. Can they use AI to achieve whatever political or social definition they want to achieve? Yes, they can, absolutely. Is it correct? That is a philosophical question. Exactly. And possibly it's not the topic of this conversation.
No, we can book another few sessions on that, I think, to have this philosophical debate. But let's focus a bit on at least where we are in Europe. Well, you not physically, but I am actually focusing on the EU AI Act and GDPR. How can like you said, indeed, it is also a cultural question, of course, but are there things that GDPR and the AI Act are doing or are restricting when it comes to bias and discrimination, for example, when using AI? Do you have some examples of that?
I mean, what they are doing, I mean, I'm not an expert in regulation, but I understand that for sensitive scopes like education and employment, algorithms that are going to be used to, for example, to pre-screen resumes, right? In this area, I think European companies have to disclose training data sets to authorities, and they have to disclose, if I'm not wrong, they have to pass a number of tests, a battery of tests. Right, that's what he's saying. The other thing, I think the European regulation is prohibiting certain AI technologies from public authorities, from the police or how to say, public from government, from use by government. with exceptions, of course. But yeah, so for example, face recognition is something that will not be able to be used, right? These are some of the examples that how the EU is regulating that. Obviously, when you disclose the training data, yeah, I mean, for sure, one of the things that they are going to look at is that training data fulfills a definition of what the authorities will define as bias. Again, it is subjective. Different authorities might have different views, and a hypothetical government we might have in the European Union 100 years from now, we have a completely different view. So it's a very human dependent thing.
Yeah. Do you also think from a broader perspective, do you think the EU AI Act is, well, you said it's limiting things in some circumstances. Do you think the EU AI Act is also, let's say, limiting innovation when it comes to AI?
Yeah. I'm going to give you a personal opinion, and I'm going to take a step back, comparing GDPR with the European AI Act. They're very different. GDPR is a law that it took a long time to be drafted. It was very well thought through. The first draft was written in 2012. It was approved in the parliament in 2016. 4 years later, it took 4 years of discussions from draft to approval. And then it came in force in 2018. Very well thought. The AI Act was much faster. The AI Act was drafted in April 2023. During 11 days, the first draft of the European Union Act of AI was written in 11 days by some members of the parliament who were not experts in AI. That was 5 months after the launch of ChatGPT. And the approval in parliament was on December 9th. So from April to December, you have like 10 months. In comparison to 4 years, that was what GDPR took. Now, from that perspective, has the AI Act been regulated fast? Yes, absolutely, right? Yeah. Possibly faster than what it takes to drive a new traffic regulation in most of the European countries, right? About how to drive in your city, possibly faster. Now, the criticism that I could make to the European AI Act is that it was done possibly too early. That is one of the criticisms. In other countries, like, for example, the United Arab Emirates, and the United Arab Emirates has a minister of AI, Omar Al-Aloma. One of the things this guy says is, I'm not against not regulating AI. I'm not against regulating AI. I want to know what I am regulating. I am going to regulate little by little when I understand the consequences because we don't know yet, right? Now, the big problem that motivated the European Union going so fast, I understand it was copyright protection. But other countries, like, for example, here in Asia, Thailand, Malaysia, these countries, they're also thinking about it, and they are saying, hey, look, but wait a second, I already have laws that protect copyrights. Do I need to make another law for that? They're thinking about, around these lines, right? So that's the criticism that could be made to the European AI Act. And the second important criticism is what you just said, is that going to hinder innovation? And it's possible. It's possible that European companies will have to make use of AI products that have been developed outside the European Union, because inside the European Union, particularly in certain markets, it couldn't work. I'm going to give you an example, a little bit making the scope a little bit broader, because although I am European, I live outside the European Union. And the example I'm going to give you is China. So when ChatGPT was first launched on 22 November 2022, there was Baidu, the Chinese company, had a similar product called Ernie around the same dates. But the Chinese government said, hey, wait a second. Before you release that, because I don't know what a chatbot is going to say, before you release that, you have to pass a battery of tests. I am going to approve what is the generative AI products for consumer that are going to be allowed There is a battery of tests. You have to disclose data. At the end of the day, similar to the European AI Act. Now, the law that they launched in China, and I am quoting literally, it's not Pedro saying this, but the law says this, is that those generative AI chatbots have to uphold the core values of socialism. Normal.
Yeah.
We are talking about China. Now, what happened is this. The approval process to launch a consumer-oriented chatbot in China is so complex, it takes so many months, that Chinese people, because Chinese people are very entrepreneurial, very hardworking, Chinese people say, we're not going to win on this. We are going to focus on generative AI for enterprise applications, generative AI for banks, generative AI for self-driving cars, generative AI for all these things that are not consumer. That's in the area of consumer where the government is sensitive. And they are leading in that space. They are leading in the space of generative AI for corporate applications, while the United States is leading in the space of generative AI for consumer-oriented applications.
Yeah.
So that thing that is happening already in China tells us what might happen in Europe.
Yeah. Thanks for taking this broader picture on a global level, because it helps us to, like you said, to see what might going to happen or other developments in the world are rather only than the EU AI Act, of course. There's a question coming in when it comes to confidentiality and privacy risks. You already said it, if you're going to use platforms that are, well, let's say hosted or built outside the EU, and one of the, important examples is of course that somebody asked, when I feed my company data into one of the bigger AI LLM models, for example, Copilot or Google, how do you see, when it comes to privacy and confidentiality, how do you see the risks of that? Because you're giving, well, your data, your precious data, to somebody else not hosted or not based in the EU then?
Well, that is an issue, right? You are giving your data to a third party. Now, that third party is contractually assuring you that it's not going to misbehave with that data, right? And well, you might choose to believe that third party if it is in a friendly country, a respectable third party. You might choose to do that. If the data is not very sensitive, you might choose to do that. You also have the option of deploying those large language models or those AI models on your own premise. There are companies that do that, that are specialized in taking open source models and allowing you to put it on your cloud or in your data center. You could do that. A lot of sensitive companies, maybe financial institutions might choose that way. But that takes us to another aspect, which is very important in certain countries, and I believe in the European Union is not really so much talked about, which is the concept of data sovereignty, right? So what is data sovereignty? So that's a political philosophy that says that the data of a country, or sensitive data of a country, has to be stored inside the country. It cannot be taken outside the country. Some countries doing this are Indonesia, Vietnam, Saudi Arabia, and possibly many others. Those are the ones that I know. And what's the rationale of this? Well, the rationale of this is, if in the future I get into a conflict with a country that is hosting part of my data, I don't know how they're going to use it against me. So that's why some countries, this is a country-level policy, some countries are requesting this. Now, what these countries are doing, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, is requesting the hyperscalers, Microsoft, GCP, AWS, to create data centers inside their country. Yeah. So it's a Microsoft-run data center inside Indonesia, inside each one of these countries. And that is something that, from a public policy perspective, some countries are doing, particularly those that want to remain geopolitically independent, because AI is playing and is going to play even more at the geopolitical level. Just to give you an example, there is the concept that started around 2017, the concept of AI, the Cold War of AI, which is technology, means the technological competition between the United States and China, and it drives parallels with the Cold War. Obviously, it's a technological competition rather than a military competition. But by the way, AI is being used by both of them for military purposes.
Yeah, that's interesting because we're going to talk about that in the next session as well. But so we'll leave that for now. But I would like to ask you to talk a little bit about the future. And I'm always trying to, let's say, wrap up our conversation by asking, in this case, you, what are, according to you, let's say, the 1 to 2 key things that we can expect in the, well, let's say, the near future, or maybe from your perspective also in the longer term. What are the things to watch in your view when it comes to it? Because that's the key topic of this session, of course. On the one hand, unleashing AI's potential, while on the other hand, dealing properly with all the requirements that comes with GDPR and the EU AI Act, for example. But what are the key developments, 1 or 2 key developments to watch in the future?
One of the key areas that has been discussed at this moment, it was one of the main topics in the World Economic Forum in February this year, is the fight against misinformation and disinformation. I think this is something that we're going to have to watch in the short term. The proponents of this misinformation and disinformation basically say, hey, AI is making it difficult to distinguish what is real, what is not real. And not only that, synthetic data is going to make it 10,000 times more difficult. So we have to regulate that. That's what some parties say. My personal opinion is that no. I mean, I think we have to make people more critical rather than regulating the truth, right? But again, that's another philosophical topic. So I think that is important because that connects us with, AI used for, or a regulation of AI in the wrong way could lead to censorship, and that could be dystopian. First point is this. Second point, and taking it to a longer horizon, is employment. AI is going to continue creating more jobs that it will destroy, like all the previous scientific or technological revolutions, the IT revolution, industrial revolution, the Neolithic. As long as 2 things remain true. The first one is that the pace of change is suitable for people to adapt. Many jobs are going to be automated. People are going to have to learn new things, change to another job. How many times can you change to another job? Well, some people maybe can do it every 10 years. Other people will be able to do it every 3 years. And other people will be able to do it every 1 year. But it's going to be challenging. So if the speed of change is very fast, a lot of people will not be able to adapt. And the second point is artificial general intelligence. If we go into a level of AI that is closer to a replacement than a tool, then employment might suffer. So in the short run, I don't think there is a risk. In the midterm and long term, yes, I do think that there are reasons to be worried about it. And the last point
briefly,
will be how will governments make use of artificial intelligence in their operations? That can be dystopian if it's not done well.
Like you said, there are many challenges and the things we need to worry about. But still, one thing that you said is we also need to be critical ourselves, not leave it all up to the technology, but we need to stay critical ourselves. Thank you very much, Pedro. Thank you for your insights, for your sometimes more philosophical debate. But I do think, and that's one of the key aims of this session, of course, we challenged and triggered the minds a bit. So I really would like to thank you for that, Pedro. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. That's it. Thank you for now.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
And thank you to the audience for your engagement, for your interaction, for your questions, of course. I hope we informed, inspired, and triggered you a bit. And as Pedro already stated, there are also a lot of questions when it comes to, let's say, well, more side the dark side of AI, exposing scams and weaponized AI. That's what we're going to talk about the 4th of June. So I would like to invite you already for that. Again, please leave us with your feedback, just a few seconds of your time. And I hope to see you next time. Please, until June 4th. Bye-bye.